Welcome to our deep dive into the remarkable yet heartbreaking story of country music star Keith Whitley. In this video, we'll explore how a gifted singer from Kentucky rose to fame on the country charts, forged a powerful musical partnership with his wife Lorrie Morgan, and ultimately fell victim to personal struggles that cut his life far too short. Join us as we uncover the highs and lows of Whitley's career, the influence he left on country music, and the lasting legacy that continues to captivate fans around the world. Keith Whitley and Lorrie Morgan had been married for 3 years at that point, and they were one of country music's emerging power couples. In a couple of weeks, Keith Whitley was scheduled to be asked to join the Grand Ole Opry himself and was riding high off his third consecutive #1 single, I'm No Stranger to the Rain, which had topped the Billboard country charts 3 weeks prior. Before Lorrie left on her flight, Keith Whitley gave her a greeting card with a note in it. Little did Lorrie Morgan know how much the note would mean to her, and how poignant it would be when she opened it a week later. This is the story of the death of country music star Keith Whitley. After Keith Whitley saw Lorrie Morgan off at the Nashville airport on that late spring day in 1989, he began a weekend of heavy drinking. His sobriety had only lasted about 6 months before he fell off the wagon once again, which couldn't have been a surprise to anyone. Whitley had been battling alcoholism since he was a teenager. He was also used to flirting with danger. During his teenage years, Whitley and his friends would sip on bottles of bootleg bourbon and drive down the winding mountain roads of Kentucky at unsafe speeds. Once, when riding in the passenger seat of a car and passing a bottle back and forth with the driver, they tried to take a sharp curve at 120 miles per hour. The driver died, and Whitley almost broke his neck. It would be one of many close calls for Whitley, including driving his own car off a 120-foot cliff and into a frozen river, walking away that time with a broken collarbone. Lucky to be alive. The whole family had a reckless streak. Keith's brother Randy died in a motorcycle accident in 1983. Whitley told the Chicago Tribune once, I learned to do things the way the old-timers did. I thought everybody had to drink to be in this business. Lefty drank, Hank drank, George was still drinking, and I had to. That's just the way it was. You couldn't put that soul in your singing if you weren't about 3 sheets in the wind. Keith Whitley's journey into country music is rooted in the rugged hills of Kentucky, where he was born in Ashland and spent his formative years in the small town of Sandy Hook. Growing up in such a tight-knit community meant that family and tradition played an enormous role in everyday life, and musical heritage was passed down through generations. From a young age, Whitley stood out. He wasn't just another local kid who liked to sing. His voice carried the raw emotion and honesty that would one day become a signature trait in his performances. When Whitley was still in high school, a fortunate meeting changed his life forever. At just 15 years old, he was invited to join Ralph Stanley's bluegrass band, the Clinch Mountain Boys, alongside his friend Ricky Skaggs, who was 16 at the time. This wasn't your usual high school after-school activity. Ralph Stanley was already a legend in the bluegrass world. The 2 young musicians caught Stanley's attention in a moment of pure happenstance. Stanley had blown a tire near Fort Gay, West Virginia, and wandered into a local club for help. Expecting to hear a jukebox blasting old Stanley Brothers songs, he was shocked to find that the voice he thought belonged to a recording was actually Keith Whitley and Ricky Skaggs singing live. This chance encounter speaks volumes about Whitley's raw talent. He had such a natural mastery of bluegrass vocals that even a seasoned professional like Ralph Stanley initially mistook it for a studio-produced recording. Whitley's voice channeled the same heartfelt emotion that Carter Stanley, Ralph's brother, had once brought to the genre, and that similarity instantly resonated with Ralph. Keith's style, deeply influenced by the Stanley Brothers' approach, gave him a timeless quality well beyond his teenage years. Before that day ended, both Keith Whitley and Ricky Skaggs found themselves drafted into one of the most respected bluegrass outfits in the country. Ralph Stanley had a rule about drinking. He wouldn't share a drink with anyone else in the band. Surprisingly, though, he made an exception for Whitley, famously remarking, "You can handle it. I'm afraid to give it to the rest of these boys." While it might seem odd for a mentor to share alcohol with a teenager, it underscores the unusual bond they had. Stanley recognized a kindred spirit in Whitley, a young man who possessed a level of talent and maturity in his singing that was far above his years. This particular anecdote also hints at Whitley's early exposure to a lifestyle that, for better or worse, became entwined with the culture of country and bluegrass musicians of that era. Being part of the Clinch Mountain Boys at such a young age allowed Keith Whitley to refine his craft in the crucible of live performances and studio sessions, experiences most teenagers could only dream about. Under Ralph Stanley's guidance, Whitley soaked up lessons in vocal phrasing, harmony singing, and stage presence. He was not just a sideman in a band. He was rapidly evolving into a standout vocalist. The music he sang carried the Appalachian soul that shaped the broader bluegrass community, and his distinctive tone was already attracting attention. It's impossible to discuss Whitley's early career without emphasizing the importance of Ricky Skaggs in his development. Both were from Kentucky, both were teenagers, and both were fearless about experimenting within the traditional confines of bluegrass. Their youthful energy breathed new life into the music, making it accessible to audiences who might have overlooked mountain music. This partnership foreshadowed how both of them would later impact country music, pushing it toward a more traditional yet modern sound in the 1980s and beyond. These early experiences didn't just shape Whitley's musical abilities, they laid the groundwork for the artist he would become. By sharing the stage with Ralph Stanley, Keith learned the importance of storytelling through song, a quality that defines many of the genre's legendary performers. He began internalizing the deep emotional connection between singer, song, and audience, a link that would set him apart when he eventually transitioned into mainstream country music. While he was still a teenager, Whitley was observing how audiences reacted to particular chord progressions, vocal inflections, and the honest narratives embedded in the lyrics. Even then, those who worked with Whitley sensed he was meant for bigger stages. The way he blended Carter Stanley's influence with his own youthful edge signaled a bright future. Of course, Whitley's life would later be marked by struggle, success, and heartbreak, but this period provided him with a solid grounding in traditional roots, strong mentorship, and a chance to develop a voice that could touch hearts across generations. When we look back, it's almost as if fate intervened on that fateful day in Fort Gay, West Virginia. Had Ralph Stanley not blown a tire, Keith Whitley might never have gotten his first big break so soon, or in such a dramatic fashion. This formative chapter in Whitley's life highlights how pure talent can shine, even in the most unexpected moments, and how a single stroke of luck can launch a career destined to leave a lasting impact on country and bluegrass music. Though hired as a guitarist, it was Whitley's singing that really made him stand out, and soon he was the lead vocalist for the Clinch Mountain Boys. After cutting his teeth with Ralph Stanley, Keith Whitley later joined J.D. Crowe in his band, The New South, right about the time his boyhood friend Ricky Skaggs left J.D. to form a band with dobro player Jerry Douglas. Whitley replaced pioneering flat-pick guitarist Tony Rice in The New South and ended up pushing the band in a more country and electric direction. Keith carried his love for drink and his close calls with self-destruction into this new endeavor. But just about the time everything would begin to unravel for him due to drinking, he would hold it together enough to pull through. Whitley released 3 successful albums with J.D. Crowe before moving to Nashville in 1983, where he would soon sign a record deal with RCA, in part due to the attention he'd earned in the New South and the success Music Row was having, with fellow Kentuckian Ricky Skaggs as an emerging solo artist. Keith Whitley's first major record was a 1984 EP called A Hard Act to Follow, and it didn't fare too well, released just before the neo-traditional movement that would sweep country music on the backs of guys like Randy Travis and George Strait. A Hard Act to Follow was deemed too country. Whitley remarked at the time, "What business am I in?" But the 1985 album LA to Miami, which took a bit more of a pragmatic approach, put Whitley on the map with songs like Miami, My Amy, 10 Feet Away, and Hard Livin'. Though the production of Miami was much more contemporary, and the lyrics, written by Hank Cochran and Dean Dillon, were a bit forced. It was the voice of Keith Whitley soaring from the song that spoke to many. It soon became one of his signature tunes. Then Whitley's 1988 record Don't Close Your Eyes set him on the path to downright superstardom, landing him his first #1 hit with the title track, which would set off a succession of 5 straight #1 songs from Whitley. The hope was that finding success would finally help settle Keith Whitley down, at least to some extent, as would, hopefully, his marriage to Lorrie Morgan in 1986. The couple had a baby in June of 1987 named Jesse Keith Whitley, and Keith also officially adopted Lorrie's daughter from her first marriage. But with Lorrie Morgan out of town that first weekend of May 1989, there was nobody there to look after Whitley or rein in his raging alcoholism. Lorrie Morgan knew the risk of entering a romantic relationship with Whitley. One of Keith's managers, Don Light, had warned her early on after the two entertainers met at the Grand Ole Opry. However, Whitley had always treated Lorrie Morgan well. She insists to this day that Keith never said a negative word to her or raised his voice at her during their entire marriage. It was himself that Keith Whitley would regularly put in harm's way. Lorrie recalls, "It was like a ticking time bomb. I knew all this going into the relationship. I thought as much as I loved Keith, surely that would help him. I feel in my own heart I kept Keith alive a lot longer because I was there at the time. I put everything on the back burner, including my career, to help Keith. Every time the phone would ring, it was in the back of my mind that there was somebody calling to tell me he'd been in a wreck or died of alcohol. It was a living hell. I was on pins and needles when he was on the road." That delicate balance between personal happiness and a potentially ruinous vice defined Whitley's marriage to Morgan. From the outside, they projected the image of a power couple, each commanding respect in the industry. Fans saw them as a symbol of a new wave in country music, 2 successful artists forging a shared path. Behind closed doors, though, Lorrie Morgan spent countless hours nurturing and worrying about Keith. Her testimony about Keith never speaking harshly to her points to a gentle nature that ran parallel to his self-destructive streak. It was not a case of an alcoholic who lashed out at loved ones. Rather, it was a man whose internal battles spurred him to endanger himself. By the time Whitley's career was hitting its stride, Lorrie's own star was also on the rise. Managing dual schedules could be stressful, leaving even less time to monitor Keith's day-to-day well-being. The arrival of a child, Jesse Keith, was a joyful event, but also added another layer of responsibility. Although many fans might assume that fatherhood would curb self-destructive habits, Keith's addiction was more deeply rooted than mere lifestyle choices. The sense of inevitability and dread that Lorrie describes waiting by the phone for bad news is heartbreaking in its clarity. It underscores the fact that no matter how talented or beloved he was, Whitley was waging a battle that neither fame nor family life could instantly resolve. Expanding on the complexities here, one sees how the music business itself can exacerbate these problems. Touring schedules, late nights, and readily available alcohol can act like tinder to the flames of an existing addiction. Moreover, the culture surrounding country music in this era often normalized heavy drinking. Some even saw it as a rite of passage or a hallmark of authenticity. To an addict, such an environment only intensified temptation. For Keith, who had been wrestling with alcohol since his teens, every tour stop, every after party was another test of willpower. Yet those close to Whitley genuinely hoped that stability through marriage and fatherhood would anchor him. There were fleeting signs that it might. Periods of sobriety gave glimpses of what life could be like if he overcame addiction. During these spans, Keith's career was unstoppable, and his personal warmth shone through. But the pattern of relapse was painfully familiar. In analyzing the dynamic with Lorrie Morgan, one sees a supportive spouse placed in an impossible situation, torn between her own burgeoning career responsibilities and the need to safeguard the man she loved from his own demons. That tension came to a tragic head in early May 1989, when circumstances aligned such that Lorrie was out of town and Keith was left to his own devices. The rest, sadly, is a story that epitomizes heartbreak in country music. On the morning of Tuesday, May 9, 1989, Keith Whitley spoke to his mother briefly on the phone and then was visited by his brother-in-law, Lane Palmer, at his home in Goodlettsville, Tennessee, near Nashville. The two drank coffee together and were planning to play a round of golf and have lunch that day. After that, Whitley was planning to write some songs to present to Lorrie Morgan after she returned from her promotional tour in Alaska, for perhaps the two to record together as duets. Brother-in-law Lane Palmer left Whitley's Goodlettsville residence at approximately 8:30 a.m., planning to return an hour later for the golf excursion. But when Palmer returned at about 11:30 a.m., he found Whitley fully clothed on his bed, unconscious and unresponsive. He called an ambulance, which took Whitley to a local hospital, where Keith Whitley was pronounced dead. The country music community was left in shock. Keith Whitley was only 34 years old. The next day, they lined Music Row in Nashville with black ribbons in remembrance. The death of Keith Whitley felt like the next chapter in country music's history of some of its greatest stars passing too early, from Hank Williams perishing in the back of his Cadillac on New Year's Day in 1953, to Patsy Cline, Hawkshaw Hawkins, and Cowboy Copas dying in a plane crash in 1963, or any number of other high-profile deaths taking country stars during the height of their popularity. These events have allowed the timeline of country music to unfold like a tragedy and have made folk heroes out of some of its greatest stars, including Keith Whitley. He had so much to live for. At the time, his career was taking off. He had a young child, and Whitley was considered country music's next superstar. He had just finished up his fourth studio album called I Wonder Do You Think of Me. He would die not knowing the Grand Ole Opry had a surprise invitation awaiting him just 2 weeks later. The reaction from Music Row, adorning the street with black ribbons, symbolized not just grief, but a collective sense of remorse and reflection. Losing an artist with so much promise reignited the deep-rooted conversation within country music circles about the toll this lifestyle can take. Figures like Hank Williams, whose death at 29 had already become a cautionary tale, re-emerged in the public consciousness. This placed Whitley in the tragic lineage of gifted artists who left us at their creative peak, elevating him to a sort of mythic status, while also underscoring the urgent need for better support systems for artists battling addiction. It's crucial to note how Whitley's impending invitation to join the Grand Ole Opry added another layer of heartbreak. The Opry membership was the pinnacle he had seemingly been striving for all his life. In the cultural landscape of country music, receiving that invitation is akin to receiving the highest professional honor one can achieve, formalizing a place among the pantheon of revered performers. Keith Whitley, who had spent his youth devoted to mastering the very roots of the genre, was on the cusp of official recognition by its most iconic institution. To die mere weeks before that induction was an irony too bitter to bear for many who adored him. The album, I Wonder Do You Think of Me, completed just before his death, stands as a testament to the promise that was cut short. Fans and critics often pore over it, searching for clues about his state of mind or glimpses of further evolution in his artistry. Although we cannot truly know what Whitley might have achieved had he lived longer, the consistent emotional depth he displayed in his vocals offers a tantalizing hint of what country music lost on that fateful day. Chart success, critical acclaim, and a devoted fan base were his to command. Only the personal demons he carried proved stronger, leading to a sense of heartbreak that permeated the entire Nashville community. The cause of death for Keith Whitley was officially ruled alcohol poisoning by local medical examiner Charles Harlan on May 10th, a day after Whitley's death. The singer's blood alcohol level was reported to be 0.47, or almost 5 times the amount to be declared intoxicated in Tennessee. Police had found 23 empty cans of Budweiser at his house, an empty bottle of Scope, and 4 half-consumed bottles of hairspray. This was on top of the alcohol Keith was believed to have consumed the evening before. Amounts of cocaine and Valium were also found in his system. The death of Keith Whitley seemed like an open and shut case. It didn't take a stretch of the imagination to believe a country music singer had drunk himself to death, especially Keith Whitley. Once, amid his sober streak in 1987, Whitley said in an interview, "It was a matter of life and death. If I hadn't stopped drinking, I don't think I'd be alive today. I did so many crazy things while drinking. No good." In the aftermath of Keith Whitley's death, rumors swirled, circumstances which have continued to linger in popular lore. As the Chicago Tribune and others reported at the time, when his death was first discovered, there was a widespread rumor that it was suicide. A 0.47 alcohol level seemed exceptionally high, even for Whitley. It's the equivalent of 21 one-ounce shots of 100 proof whiskey. Why would Keith Whitley drink himself to death when his career was just hitting its stride and he had so much to live for? One theory was that Whitley was conflicted as a staunch traditionalist who was being asked to record more commercially viable material, or that he was feeling the pressure of stardom. Whitley recalled one time in 1986 hearing Miami My Amy on the radio station WSM in Nashville. He said then, "I was drinking and wondering what I was going to do, and they played that song and announced I'd been nominated for Best New Male Vocalist by the Academy of Country Music. I didn't even know it." The publishing of Keith Whitley's autopsy report put most of the rumors to bed, though they would re-emerge in subsequent years. The medical examiner who wrote and performed the autopsy, Charles Harlan, would soon become widely discredited and blamed for numerous false reports and unethical practices. He left the medical examiner post in 1994 after 3 separate women accused him of sexual harassment. He was also known for making gruesome remarks to families and colleagues about deceased individuals and reportedly kept body parts in jars around his office and home. In 2005, the state of Tennessee found Charles Harlan guilty of 20 counts of misconduct and permanently revoked his medical license. Then in 2010, The accusations became even more severe, with the doctor being blamed for numerous botched autopsies, resulting in false murder convictions. Some fans of Keith Whitley and conspiracy theorists have used the discredited legacy of Charles Harlan to wonder just how accurate the autopsy of Keith Whitley was, and if another cause of death could be possible. There have also been lingering questions about how old Keith Whitley was when he passed. Though popular knowledge and much reporting said he was 33 and born in 1955, this was supplied by his label RCA Records and printed in many reports. According to his birth certificate and other documents, Keith Whitley was actually born on July 1st, 1954, making him 34 at the time. Another wrinkle to the story of Keith Whitley's death were the revelations Lorrie Morgan made in her book Forever Yours, Faithfully, published in 1997. In the book, Morgan goes into some fairly lurid details of Keith Whitley's life and death, including accusations of infidelity and how she couldn't even trust Whitley around alcohol-based toiletries or beauty products due to his addiction, sometimes having to tie his leg to hers at night so he wouldn't sneak out of bed to drink, or accompany him when he used the bathroom to make sure he wouldn't guzzle something on the counter or beneath the sink. Morgan also called into question some of the specifics of how Keith Whitley was discovered on the day he died. She alleges that Whitley's manager at the time, Jack McFadden, dropped by between Lane Palmer's 2 visits, but was unable to get Keith to answer the locked bedroom door. Hearing rustling sounds inside, McFadden didn't show any grave concern and ultimately left. Morgan further alleges that Lane Palmer found a baggie of cocaine on Whitley's dresser when he discovered Keith incapacitated and swallowed it before authorities arrived. These revelations brought up questions of whether more could have been done to save Keith Whitley or something done sooner, while also supplying fuel to theories of a cover-up. However, Lorrie Morgan and the Whitley family have never publicly disputed the finding that alcohol poisoning was the ultimate cause of his death. On May 12, 1989, more than 500 mourners attended Keith Whitley's funeral, where longtime friend and fellow Kentuckian Ricky Skaggs presented the eulogy and spoke specifically about the ills of drugs and alcohol abuse. Keith Whitley was laid to rest at the Spring Hill Cemetery near Nashville, a serene final resting place that would later become a pilgrimage site for fans of country music. His gravestone bears 2 poignant quotes, "Forever yours faithfully," and "His being was my reason," both heartfelt tributes from Lorrie Morgan. These inscriptions not only signify their deep bond, but also stand as enduring symbols of Morgan's love and devotion to Whitley even after his untimely death. Lorrie Morgan's career, which had been intertwined with Whitley's life and music, took a significant turn after his passing. Free from the burden of caring for her troubled husband, she found the space to fully dedicate herself to her music. In 1990, she achieved her first #1 hit with the song 5 Minutes, a milestone that marked the beginning of a new chapter in her career. The success of 5 Minutes was followed by a series of top 10 hits in subsequent years, solidifying her place in the country music world. Morgan's personal life also evolved after Whitley's death. She went on to marry fellow country singer and songwriter John Randall, and later she married another country artist, Sammy Kershaw. Both of these marriages, however, were short-lived. In between, she dated several prominent figures, including actor and United States Senator Fred Thompson, as well as Dallas Cowboys quarterback Troy Aikman. Despite these relationships, Morgan has always remained fiercely loyal to Keith Whitley's memory, often speaking of him with great reverence. She continues to be one of the most vocal advocates for preserving his legacy, ensuring that his contributions to country music are not forgotten. The couple's son, Jesse Keith Whitley, has also followed in his father's footsteps, carving out his own career in country music and embracing his father's legacy as both inspiration and responsibility. Keith Whitley's death had a profound impact on the broader country music community. One of the most poignant tributes came from Vince Gill, a rising country star at the time of Whitley's passing. Gill was moved to write the song "Go Rest High on That Mountain" in the wake of Whitley's death, a song that has since become one of the most iconic eulogy ballads in country music. With its deeply spiritual and reflective lyrics, it resonates with listeners who have experienced loss, making it a staple at funerals. One of the most notable performances of this song was at the funeral of George Jones in 2013, where Gill's emotional delivery alongside harmonies from Patty Loveless left a lasting impression on all who witnessed it. Ricky Skaggs, a longtime friend and collaborator of Vince Gill, provided harmony vocals on the original studio recording of "Go Rest High on That Mountain." Skaggs and Gill had shared a history dating back to the late 1970s, when they were both members of the bluegrass band Boone Creek. Their musical connection added another layer of emotional depth to the song, making it a fitting tribute to a fallen comrade in the world of country music. Keith Whitley's legacy is not just defined by his accomplishments before his untimely death. It's also shaped by the sense of unfulfilled potential that many in the industry feel he left behind. Despite his relatively short career, Whitley managed to achieve 2 #1 hits and 4 top 15 singles. His music resonated deeply with fans, and there is little doubt he would have continued to dominate the country charts had he lived. His voice, style, and songwriting were all set to play a significant role in the evolving landscape of country music. Many believe Whitley's influence extended beyond his own music, shaping the direction of the genre as a whole. Country music historians and industry insiders often speculate that the commercial resurgence of country music in the late 1980s and early 1990s, often referred to as the Class of '89, which included artists like Garth Brooks, Alan Jackson, Clint Black, and Travis Tritt, might have been different had Whitley been alive to contribute. His absence was keenly felt, as it seemed like a piece of that era was missing without him. Garth Brooks, one of the most successful country artists of all time, has been vocal about his admiration for Keith Whitley. When Brooks was announced as an inductee into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2012, he reportedly tried to decline the honor, feeling that Keith Whitley, along with Randy Travis, should be inducted before him. Brooks said, "My generation's shot at Haggard and Jones was Keith Whitley. Keith needs to be in here." This statement underscores the profound respect that Brooks and many of his peers have for Whitley, not just as an artist, but as a cornerstone of the country music tradition. The enduring impact of Keith Whitley's life and music is felt not only in the songs he left behind, but also in the memories and tributes of those who knew and loved him. Lorrie Morgan, with her unwavering dedication, continues to honor his legacy, ensuring that his contributions to country music are remembered and celebrated. Their son, Jesse Keith Whitley, carries the torch forward, reminding the world of the talent and spirit of his father. As fans visit Spring Hill Cemetery, they not only pay their respects to Keith Whitley, but also reflect on the profound loss that his death represents, a loss that reverberates through the hearts of those who loved him and the country music community as a whole. The gravestone, with its touching inscriptions, serves as a reminder of a life cut too short, but also of the lasting legacy Keith Whitley left behind, one that continues to inspire and move people to this day. Keith Whitley's life was a testament to both immense talent and unrelenting personal battles, a story of triumph and tragedy that continues to resonate with countless country music fans. Despite the heartbreak of his untimely passing, his voice and artistry live on through his iconic recordings and the unwavering dedication of those who loved him. Thank you for watching the tragic life and death of Keith Whitley. We hope this look into his life has helped you appreciate the enduring impact he had on the genre. If you found this video meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories that honor the legends of country music.